Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, here we are. I'm glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this July 25th, 2017 day on our calendar, named after me, the Gregorian calendar. Well, anyway, I wanted to mention before, I got two things to talk about before we get back to Islam, slavery, and terrorism, and an interview with Dr. Peter Hammond, who I referred to yesterday in the most of the show, and said I would continue this interview, but go to my website at arcticbeacon.com. I'm running a pledge drive all month to keep the show on the air. It's vital, and I'll tell you why. Because advertisers run for the hills when you start talking about the Vatican-led New World Order and any kind of truth. So, what happens? They snuff out all these shows. There's many other people out there who'd love to be doing this, but they're probably a lot smarter than me. Because they realize there's no financial gain in it ever. And you got to survive, right? You got to survive. And who knows? I want to thank some of the people that have donated. But we need a lot more to keep the show going, to be honest with you. And I'm going to try in the next month to get that done. So if you could, whatever you can spare, please do. Donate, because I'd love to keep doing this show. Okay. Go to arcticbeacon.com. That'll direct you to the new website, Greg Anthony's Journal. And then you can press the donate button, and it would be greatly appreciated. Okay? So, with that out of the way, let's discuss this. Because someone sent me something that's quite interesting, and I read it this morning. I get a lot of things that come through the emails, right? And this person sent me this, and I might preface it by saying there's a picture of Native Americans and medicine women. And prior to, years ago, back in the 80s, when I came back from Rome, I was quite interested in the Native American experience and met a lot of people that were at Wounded Knee, talked to a lot of Hopi, a lot of different natives, trying to get down to their culture. What do they believe in? Do they believe in a great creator? Do they believe prayers count? And they do. And I guess it depends on who you're praying to. And they would always tell me they pray to the great creator. And then there's some other little, they have their customs just like every other civilization did. But I found them to be genuine people. And what really upset me is when the Vatican came through and ripped them apart, not only did we steal all their property, but we took apart their souls along with it. And I've discussed that with the Jesuit schools and also the mission schools they created here. Really was a genocide of American Indians. And there's a handful left compared to what there used to be. Just like there's a handful of buffalo left. So anyway, they did the same thing in Canada. And that really upset me. So I was thinking, when this came across my desk, I said, let's ask a question. Does prayer matter? I think it does. And it matters that you know who you're praying to. Now, again, here's another thing that's interested me, miracles. I wonder, and I want to ask all you Christians out there, the only thing I find strange is that there were so many miracles being done in the Bible 2,000 years ago. Where are they all today? How come there's no more today? I don't know. I mean, that's just a question. Doesn't mean I'm a doubting Thomas. Doesn't mean I don't believe in Christianity is a worthy cause. I'm just saying, it's just, to me, rather interesting to ask that. And I'd wondered what people who really study the Bible think about that. Okay? But anyway, let me share you this as it was told to me. There was once an old medicine woman who lived in the countryside. And one day as she passed near a village, she was approached by a woman who told her of a sick child nearby. She beseeches her to help this child, begs this old medicine Native American woman to come into the village and help this poor child, and a crowd gathered when she decided to help, because for such a woman was a rare sight for these people. One woman brought the sick child to her, and she said a prayer over her. And then somebody shouted out, "Do you really think your prayer will help her when medicine has failed?" yelled a man from the crowd. "You apparently know nothing of such things," said the old medicine woman to the man. The man became very angry, aggressive with his words, and his face grew hot and red. He was angry. He was about to say something, or perhaps strike out, when the old medicine woman walked over him and said, quote, "If one word has so much power as to make you so angry and so red hot, may not another have the power to heal?" And thus the old medicine woman healed 2 people that day. Quote, "Language does have the power to change reality," she said. "Therefore treat your words as mighty instruments they are." And the person that sent it to me said this: to heal, to bring into being, to nurture, to cherish, to bless, to forgive, and to teach. Use your words for that. And the choice is yours, folks. And it is my choice to share this with you today. And peace to you and all of yours. Okay, now let's get back to Dr. Peter Hammond. His book, Slavery, Terrorism, and Islam, is a must-read. You got to look at what he compiled. Now, this guy isn't just the ordinary Joe off the street researcher who sits in a Cambridge or sits in a Harvard, walled college doing research. This guy traveled the world. This guy helped people all over Africa, passed out millions of Bibles all his life. And he talked to Mandela. He's been, an advocate of Christianity for many, many years. And so throughout his studies, the reason I liked it was because he actually saw what was happening in Islamic countries. He actually was there. He knows the difference. He knows what's up. One thing I found strange, and maybe not strange, maybe there's a limit to what you can do and what you can't do in this world, and that's probably true. But as I said yesterday, he leaves out the Vatican connection to Islam. And I guess it's okay. Let me do that. So let's get back to Dr. Peter Hammond. And we're about 13 minutes and 37 seconds into this very long interview. I may not be able to finish it today, but let's give it a shot. Here on the Investigative Journal.
My brother could be that ignorant. Yeah. The Crusades began after 5 centuries of Islamic jihad, when they had laid waste to Christian civilization over the whole of North Africa, destroyed over 3,200 churches in the first 300 years of Islam alone, just in North Africa.
How many?
In the 1 century,
3,000.
200 churches were destroyed in the Middle East, just in the first 3 centuries of Islam. But in the 1 century before the Crusades began, I'm talking about the 11th century, before the Crusades began, over 10,000 Christian churches were destroyed by the Muslims before the Crusades began.
And that's what caused it. That's what caused the Crusades. Yeah.
Yes. To say that the Crusades began the distrust and tensions in the Middle East is ludicrous and it's dishonest. Obviously, the Crusades are only a reaction to 5 centuries of Islamic jihad and violence. Remember, the Muslims were attacking even Paris. The Battle of Tours in France, just a century after Muhammad's death in 732. Only Charles Martel, the hammer, stopped them and threw them back across the Pyrenees. For 800 years, the Muslims occupied Spain. For hundreds of years, they occupied Hungary, and they occupied Greece, and the whole of what today is Romania and Bulgaria. A lot of Europe was under Muslim occupation. And the Moors and the Turks were the greatest threat to European civilization for centuries. And that's even before the Crusades began, they were a threat. So the Crusades were a defensive reaction.
Then it says, looks like 1,500,000 Armenians were murdered in Turkey in 1915 by Islam. In other words, that makes Hitler look like a Sunday school outing. Picnic.
I'm afraid so. In fact, when you look at the genocides perpetrated by Muslim regimes against Christian minorities throughout the Middle East. Do you know that half of all the Christians on the planet were wiped out in the first 3 centuries of Islam? Christianity shrunk by 50% between the 7th century and the 10th century. Before the Crusades began, the Muslims either forcibly converted or killed 1/2 of all Christians on the planet between the 7th and the 10th century. And the genocide of the Armenian Christians in this last century in Turkey is so well documented, and yet to this day the Turks don't want to acknowledge it, they don't want to admit it. You can go onto the website to look at Armenian genocide or genocide in Turkey, and you'll get more pictures than you ever want to see and more facts and details. But these are just some of the genocides we have to look at. Islam has been the most relentless enemy of civilization and of Christianity in all of history.
The enemy of civilization. Yeah.
They have been. In fact, you can see it to this day, how they're still trying to force women to wear 7th century Arabian tents, these hijabs, how they're trying to oppress women. If anyone's concerned for women's rights, just study what Sharia law says about women. And a woman's testimony has no validity against a man's, how a non-Muslim's testimony has no validity against the Muslims. That is why in Muslim countries, when a woman reports that she's been raped, she ends up being hung or stoned to death. This happens in Pakistan, this happens in Saudi Arabia, this happens throughout the Muslim world. Women who report that they're being raped, they're the ones who get executed.
I've heard that. We had a program about that last week at our church. But anyway, here's another, it says, in your book, you ask the question, where did Islam come from? Did it come from God, from man, or from the devil? And I think you've answered that question.
When you look at the fruit, it becomes clear, but it's also interesting.
Okay, I have to answer that myself. It comes from man, and it comes directly from the Vatican. They created this enemy. That's the point that's missing. But anyway, I wonder if he could have got his book published if he got into that subject. I don't think so. But anyway, maybe he's smart not to do it. Maybe he knows.
To notice that when Muhammad first began receiving his visions, his dreams, he had what sounded like epileptic fits. His first knee-jerk reaction was to rush to his wife Khadija and say, "I'm demon-possessed. I'm being tormented by jinn, by demons, by spirits." And it's his wife Khadija who said, "No, you're too good a man. It couldn't be demons. This must be angels." And it's interesting that all of the hallmarks of the revelations he received have the hallmarks of demonic oppression and so on. And people who've studied this are pretty convinced that, as the scripture says, don't believe an angel coming to you, giving you any other revelation. Even the devil can make himself an angel of light.
Now it says, the persecution of Christians by Muslims has become a forbidden subject in Western circles. And we've already gone into that. I guess you don't have to comment, but I can see that's true. And it also goes into a movie here that was produced, I think, in England, where, or maybe it was Hollywood, where they said, The Kingdom of Heaven. And it took historical facts and turned them upside down and made it look like Islam was the good guys and the Christians were the bad people. I guess that's why we have so much negative propaganda about the Crusades.
Very much. In the book of Revelation, we read that at the end, an angel will be sent to bind Satan that he might deceive the nations no more.
Right.
And on a couple of occasions, the Bible tells us how the whole world lies in the grip of the evil one and how Satan is deceiving nations. And we can see one of the tools of Satan to deceive the nations is through Hollywood. There's a lot of deception, a lot of lies. And this film, The Kingdom of Heaven, is one of the most outrageous distortions of history ever seen on the film. Everything, the geography is wrong, the history is wrong, the teaching is wrong. They attribute Islamic doctrine to Christians.
Yes.
Where the Christians say you must pay extra taxes that you can be allowed to pray in Muslim prayers, which is nothing that Christians have ever done, but the Muslims require Christians to this day to pay extra jizya taxes in Muslim countries. A Muslim country gives Christians 8 times higher taxes than a Muslim receives, and so on.
8 times?
Imagine if you in America were to say all Muslims in America must pay 8 times higher taxes than Americans, because after all, it's their religion. It's caused all this extra security cost and terrorism, TSA and the war on terror and all this. So imagine, how would Americans feel if you doubled, tripled, or quadrupled the taxes of Muslims in America? Would the ACLU have something to say about that?
And yet that's exactly what the Muslims do to Christians in the Muslim countries.
That's correct. And in Kingdom of Heaven, in the film, Hollywood has the Christians saying, it's not a sin to kill a Muslim, it's a pathway to heaven.
Yeah, I saw that. They had a monk saying that, when really that's the policy of the Muslims.
Only the Muslims teach that it's no sin to kill an infidel, it's a pathway to paradise. That is not something Christians or any other religion teaches.
Unbelievable.
But this director, Ridley Scott, turns reality on its head and attributes Islamic doctrine to Christians.
Well, you know, while I'm thinking of it, I think every one of our listeners ought to get a copy of this book. How can they get a copy of it? How's the best way to get a copy of it?
You can go onto our website, frontline.org.za, frontline.org.za. You can see all the details of it. We have got order forms. You can get it. We've got an office actually in Colorado Springs as well. You'll see the contact details there. But our Frontline Fellowship literature films that go along with it. But the Slavery, Terrorism, and Islam is definitely our most popular book. And it's the most on target because the Muslims have even given death threat fatwas against me for simply writing a historical book.
Unbelievable. And
contact us, email us at admin@frontline.org.za, admin@frontline.org.za, or go on our website, www.frontline.org.za.
I don't know who got this copy for me, but it is probably the most important book outside the Bible that I've ever read. This is unbelievable about what's going on in America today.
There's no end to the atrocities of Muslims, and I wish we could say it's an end, but it isn't. Right now, every Sunday, churches in Nigeria are being attacked by suicide bombers and car bombs. Every day, Christians are being bombed in Sudan and the Nuba Mountains by the Sudan Air Force. The Muslims are continuing their jihad against Christians to this day. This isn't only a historical lesson, it's a contemporary threat, and that's the importance of why we've got to know our enemy, and we've got to know the gospel, and we've got to know our history in order to win this fight for faith and freedom.
I remember reading in here that Muhammad himself was a slave owner. Is that right?
Not only a slave owner, he was a slave trader.
He was not
a slave trader, he was a slave raider. He kidnapped people and sold them to slavery. He held people for ransom. At one point, he had over 600 Jewish men in Medina, dig their own graves, had them killed and from their wives and children, and then he sold all their wives and children into slavery, the widows and orphans, but he took some to be his concubines. That's the kind of person Muhammad was. Here's what you call a bandit. He raided caravans on 47 occasions. In other words, like a cash and transit robber. He held people as ransom. He was a kidnapper. He said, and this is in the hadith, he gave permission to his soldiers to gang rape captured females and make them slaves and even sell them as sex slaves. So he's not the kind of person you'd want as your neighbor, let alone someone you'd call a holy prophet.
Right. Okay. And the other thing that's important is that Muslims are in Africa enslaving Africans today. Black Africans are being enslaved today by Muslims.
That's correct. I have been bombed by Muslims while preaching in church on Sunday, on more than one occasion. I've come under aerial bombardment, artillery bombardment, rocket bombardment. We have had not only death threats, we have had churches attacked. Our mission station, Frontline Fellowship's mission base in Sudan, was bombed 10 times.
Well, I did want want to mention this. I still have miracles on my mind. And maybe it's a miracle he's still alive after writing this book and going through all those bombardments, because he seems like a very, very good man. Okay, back to Dr. Peter Hammond.
Bombed our mission station. They bombed the local hospital 10 times. For people to tell me this is a peaceful and tolerant religion, they're obviously ignorant of history and ignorant of reality of what's happening right now.
So there's no freedom of religion in a Muslim country, only in Christian countries. Is that right?
That is correct. In fact, you can tell that by the fact that where are the refugees in the world going? Where's immigration going? People are voting with their feet, going out of Muslim countries, coming into Christian countries. You don't get people fleeing from Christian countries into Muslim countries. People tend to flee in the direction of freedom.
Freedom. Okay.
Well, flee to Muslim country.
We're running out of time. Let me just give you this quote. It is no wonder that William Murr, M-U-I-R, one of the greatest Orientalists of all times, concluded at the end of his long and distinguished career, quote, "The sword of Mohammed and the Quran are the most fatal enemies of civilization, liberty, and truth which the world has ever known. An unmitigated cultural disaster parading as God's will." So,
well, history proves that, but the trouble is, it seems you're not allowed to say that in a politically correct culture. And that's why we knew this book had to be written. And we've actually revealed that this is now the third edition, 3 times larger than the first one. And we continue to get death threats for having produced it, but we're convinced that the truth will set us free.
Now, what's the relationship between these guys like George Soros and the communists and the Muslims? Do you think they're working together?
Islam and communism do seem to work together, because look how North Korea cheerfully provides nuclear weapons and technology to Iran. Notice how the Soviet Union provided so many weapons to the Muslim world. I see how Red China is providing all the weapons that are being used by the Islamic dictatorship of Sudan to bomb us in South Sudan. So when we're being attacked, I've been attacked, our mission teams have been struck by MiGs, behind helicopters, we've been bombed by Soviet weaponry, B-10s, Russian T-62 tanks. There's no doubt in our mind that the Muslims are using Soviet and Red Chinese technology and weapons. Obviously, they're working together. In fact, if I can quote the reformers, Martin Luther said that Islam, Muhammad, is the little horn of Antichrist. Yeah. And in fact, I see in many ways communism and Islam working together in Satan's hands as the two greatest enemies of the church and of freedom.
We're out of time. Tune in next week for the rest of the news.
Okay, so there we go. He presented, I thought it was a fairly decent interview. I don't know about you. And I enjoyed it. That was Dr. Frank Simon, a medical doctor who conducted that interview, and a Christian. And remember this, go to Dr. Peter Hammond, Slavery, Terrorism, Islam, The Historical Roots and Contemporary Threat. So you can Google that and get his book. You know what I'm going to do? I've got another interview that he did, and I thought we'd finish up the next half hour doing that. And we're going to have to take a break in a couple seconds here. But, you know, thinking about that, this whole idea of miracles, wouldn't it be interesting if people, what do you think, have you ever experienced a miracle in your life? And I'm not talking about the kind of miracles like, oh, it's a miracle I got up today. Oh, it was a miracle that I got to work on time. It was a miracle that the bus made it here. Look at how, you know, all those kind of miracles. Think about that. We'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're talking to Sherman Skolnick. I did this interview back in 2005. Sherman has since passed away. Like many of the other people that I've been playing my old interviews, find it very interesting. And I hope there's more people like this on the horizon, so to speak. But we're talking about the legal system, and that's close to my heart because I do have a law degree. And at one time, I did practice as a workers' compensation hearing rep while doing many other things at a law firm, such as writing cases, writing briefs for criminal lawyers, taking in criminal law, taking in clients in civil cases, and learning every inside nook and cranny of how to do legal research. Because I said, I might not be the smartest guy and know everything, but I can find anything. And that's what the law is all about. Now we have a system, and I want to just give you an inside story on what the law is about. because since in the last few months I've had to go back and do some legal work, which I'm doing right now, just to survive. Oh boy, was that a shock to the system. I'm spending most of my days now researching, and luckily you can do it online now, and I'm not talking about Google. I'm talking about a very sophisticated legal library that you can get online, and luckily I have someone that I have access to that, so I can find anything, anywhere, anywhen, at any time with this. It's kind of like I don't have to walk to the library anymore. And I wonder in law schools if they even teach that, because there were courses I took where you had to really know how to navigate around the legal library. It's not like going in to a public library and looking for fiction versus nonfiction. It's very complicated. And I kind of miss touching the books and actually reading. But anyway, my eyes are taking a beating with the screens now that you have to look at all the time. And someone told me, they said, there's a thing you can get on Firefox, which is called night vision for internet, for people who are on the internet. I guess it saves your eyes. So I'm going to look into that. I do most of my work in the day. But anyway, what I'm getting at is the legal system. What's it all about? From an academic point of view, it's beautiful. I love law school, to be honest with you. It opened my mind. It's kept my mind young. I think my mind's 30 years younger than the average mind because of it. Because you've got to use it or you lose it. And so what happens when you get out into the real world? You see what Sherman Skolnick deals with. And that's what you deal with as a lawyer without even knowing it, if you're honest. So you work hard, you do all your legal research, and you have everything, all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and you have this client who deserves justice, and you don't have any idea about the backroom dealings. And it happens in so many places, in so many types of cases. And I'm working on one right now that I'll tell you about, and if the plaintiffs in the two cases that I'm working on, get a fair shake, it would be fantastic. But I'm always reminded of the backroom dealings, and that's what Sherman's talking about. So, what happens? What, do you just fold up the justice system? Go back to Judge Roy Bean in the Old West? Remember that? There's a bar room, and they turned it into a courtroom, and they get better justice than we do today with all the money we spend. But anyway, enough on the legal system. But let's get back to the real story, the story never told, about what goes on in those backroom dealings with Sherman Skolnick.
Okay. Right. Now, there's a lot of details that, of course, CBS didn't go into because of financial hang-ups that they have. Some of the penetration agents working for Valerie Plame, who were murdered because they were working deep undercover in hot spots all over the world, and that their whole operation got out in the open when she was figured as a deep cover CIA operative. Now, some of those penetration agents were in very dangerous countries, enemies of the United States. So getting them out into the open, it caused them to be murdered. And that was dealt with in CBS's program. Now, the angle that we have worked on for 2.5 years is as follows. CIA overseas is the Coca-Cola company overseas is American CIA proprietary company. What does that mean? A proprietary company purports to be a private company that is actually doing work for the American CIA, and the CIA pays for their expenses and so on. So that overseas, some of the spies hang their hat in a Coca-Cola office, but are actually sucking up information, acting as a vacuum pump for the American CIA. And we wrote an entire series of more than 12 parts that's on my website, skolnicksreport.com. And that's after my name, Skolnicks, skolnicksreport.com. And that series is called Coca-Cola, CIA, and the Courts. Obviously, in this radio program, there isn't time to go into all of that.
No, there isn't, Sherman. We're going to take a break right now. We may even have you back on again. I know 1 hour is not going to be enough. I want to get back and talk about Fitzgerald's indictment, what you know about it, the real story behind that, on the investigative journal. We're back on the investigative journal. My guest is Sherman Skolnick, a man responsible for putting federal judges behind bars and the Illinois Supreme Court years ago in one of the biggest judicial scandals in our country. And on his website, Skolnick's Report, that's SKOLNICKS report.com, you can read many of his articles. And on the website, I see Sherman sitting, John Paul Stevens, an attorney with that bribery scandal commission, is pictured with you and that on your website. And I know that they know about you in Washington and are probably not too happy. Have you had any kind of repercussions for all your stories you've been doing lately?
I'm going to get into that, but I'm a technical person. If it gets too technical, I'm sure you're going to jump in and ask me to clarify, but let me...
Go ahead. Pick up where you left off. Tell us about, you were talking about the Coca-Cola Corporation.
Now, why do I bring up this point? Because we have pending details in the court system that Coca-Cola money, together with Mickey Mouse money, Walt Disney Company, was used to bribe 5 of the 9 judges on the U.S. Supreme Court in one of the most important cases in our lifetime, Bush versus Gore. Whether you like Bush more than Gore or Gore more than Bush is not the point. The point is the court split 5-4. The 5-judge majority voted to arbitrarily install George W. Bush as the occupant and resident of the Oval Office. The 4 dissenting judges, including my former lawyer who sits on the U.S. Supreme Court, John Paul Stevens. Stevens wrote the most blistering dissenting opinion in the history of the High Court. A dissenting opinion, in other words, is those that voted against installing Bush.
Exactly.
Now, the spark plug of the 5 judges that voted to arbitrarily and corruptly install Bush at the White House in December 2000 was Antonin Scalia. By the way, if I had to describe him, I would say that he is a proto-fascist. He and his family were related to the late dictator of Italy, Benito Mussolini. All right? Now, that's an important point.
Doesn't surprise me.
The other thing is, we have been working on the High Court, the U.S. Supreme Court corruption for 2.5 years. In October 2004, Vanity Fair magazine, with a 600,000 circulation, without mentioning us by name, used about 1% of our High Court bribery investigation.
You said 1%?
Yeah, they didn't bother mentioning that we started. They didn't mention that Homeland Security has stopped our documents from being delivered to the Supreme Court building in Washington, and so on. Of course, that's quite illegal, but you can read all about it on my website. There isn't time to go into all those intricate technical details on this program. Maybe in a further follow-up program, perhaps. But here is the point. The point is we have detailed the corruption of the U.S. Supreme Court in Bush versus Gore. And it is an ongoing situation. The law clerks of the 4 dissenting judges have been accused of stealing the private records of the 5 judges that voted for Bush. The FBI is spreading rumors that they would like to grab me from my house, take me to Washington, and demand that I explain to them how we're going about investigating the High Court in Washington. Well, they're claiming that I did this in combination with some of the dissenting judges. In 1969, when I, as the head of our group, touched off the scandal of bribery of the Illinois Supreme Court, my accusations were to be presented to a special tribunal. Although I'm self-educated in law, they didn't wish me to present the accusations of bribery, and they selected for me a prominent local attorney who in the beginning I didn't particularly like, but he did a proper job, and I was sitting right near him during the whole several weeks when he presented the bribery accusations to a special tribunal. And of course, the High Court of Illinois was collapsed. Half of the court was swept away. So,
and who was that lawyer?
John Paul Stevens.
Present-day Supreme Court judge.
Right. I became famous, and he became famous, and he ended up sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court. They are now claiming that he secretly collaborated with me in this project of fingering the 5 judges on the High Court in Washington of getting bribes in Bush versus Gore.
Wow. I got to break in here because I've talked to Sherman so many times. And, you know, as the years go by, you forget some things. And I forgot about that connection that he had between Stevens on the Supreme Court and Stevens representing him back in Chicago. Wow. Let's go forward.
Let's just say he's my former lawyer. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
And if the FBI wants me, I have a known address. They're going to have to break down my door and take me away. Because I am not volunteering to assist them in a sort of a contempt of court, sort of a rigmarole, as has happened to me 8 times in my career. It's not glamorous to be in jail. It's very dangerous. But anyway, that's where that stands. So you can see where I'm coming from. Now, these type of situations may come out, by way of Patrick Fitzgerald, because what he is doing in digging into the CIA leak case.
Sherman, can I put just a hold on this for 3 minutes while we go to commercial? We'll be back with Fitzgerald's indictment, Skolnick's view on it, on the Investigative Journal, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Welcome back to the Monday edition of the Investigative Journal. We got a half hour to go with Sherman Skolnick. And before I get to Sherman, I just wanted to mention that I also write for the American Free Press, and you just listened to a commercial about them. It's still one of the few papers that prints the truth. If you want to get the Greg Szymanski or the RBN special, just go to www.americanfreepress.net and tell them you want the Greg Szymanski or the RBN special, and you'll get 16 weeks of the American Free Press for just $16. And then you can also say you want to see Sherman Skolnick article in there that I wrote, and that should be in there also in the coming weeks. So anyway, Sherman, let's get back to you. We have a half hour, and I want you to pick up where you left off about Patrick Fitzgerald.
Okay, I had to break in there because it's almost serendipitous because I was listening to the commercial break while I put I had headphones on, and I'm listening to the commercial break, and they're talking about the American Free Press. Now, many of you don't know. Now you know, because back then I used to write for the American Free Press. And listen, what I said about them? Listen, did you see you heard what I said? They tell the truth. They do it all. Do all this. I was promoting them. And let me tell you what was going on. The American Free Press, they liked the way I wrote. Okay, I did not write specifically about the Vatican. I was very concerned about 9/11, and I kept the Vatican out of it. And I wanted to bring them in, but I was not I was basically wading my way through this new alternative media. I'd come from the mainstream. And so, all of a sudden, the American Free Press contacts me, and they're paying me $200 an article. And they were printing at the time, sometimes I'd do 2 or 3 articles a week. It was a weekly paper. And I was writing more or less kind of in that style of what you get on the internet now from most of these people. They don't touch the Vatican story. So I thought these guys were, all right, I'll play the game for a while. And I wasn't in there to take them down or to do anything. So what I started to do was on my own, because of my experiences in Rome, I started interviewing people, on the telephone, on my own, people that had Vatican knowledge here in the States. And so when I started to put it all together, I said, I got to bring this out. The people deserve to know about it. So here I am getting $400 to $600 a week from the American Free Press, and then also getting a hefty sum from people. It's an amazing story. People seem to like to donate to what I was saying 10 years ago. But today, it's like the well went dry. And here's the reason. Because there aren't many people that listen to what we do here. And I know that because I read the statistics. And the reason people don't, the people I was speaking about are those who don't want to accept anything like this. Or, the internet's got so sophisticated that sites like this, shows like this are blocked. Well, what I'm getting at is this. So as I started talking to these people, I found out, once I started talking about the Vatican, guess what? No more money from the American Free Press, get kicked off of all those stations, and then I found out they were controlled by the Vatican themselves. They're COINTEL stations. That's how you learn the truth. You get yourself involved in it. Sherman Skolnick for the last 6 minutes here, and I'm going to play some more of him tomorrow. Here we go.
Yeah, if he continues to dig into the national security questions in the CIA leak case, he no doubt would come across the Coca-Cola angle. It is a matter of undisputed federal court record. It is known to the major radio and TV commercial outlets that because of their financial hang-ups with Coca-Cola as a major sponsor, which is obviously not on this program, otherwise you wouldn't be talking to me. This line would have gone dead by now. So, obviously Coca-Cola is not a sponsor of your program. Now,
obviously. But, maybe I'll ask him.
By the way, the Coca-Cola bribery of the high court business has been submitted to a series of secret courts. We have documented that in the series on my website, SkolnickReport.com, on a series called Coca-Cola, CIA, and the Courts. You can read it for yourself. There's a group of secret courts that hears about the misdeeds of federal judges. There's very few people that know about it. I happen to be an expert about it. I've written about it. You can see it on my website. Now, the federal prosecutor, in digging into Scooter Libby, the chief of staff to Cheney, is bound to get into another very touchy national security question. What is that? There's an international swindler named Mark Rich, whose real name is Reich, R-E-I-C-H, but they call him Mark Rich. In 85 and 86, he was facing indictment in the United States for massive embezzling and swindling. Daddy Bush arranged for him to flee the country just ahead of an arrest warrant, and Mark Rich is now resident in Zug, Z-U-G, Switzerland. There is a whole series on my website, SkolnickReport.com, about what all Mark Rich has done. For example,
I have to break in here because if you don't think these presidents are connected and they all work in the same Vatican-led Illuminati scheme, what he was talking about, Mark Rich, was given exile by Daddy Bush. But guess who pardoned Mark Rich? William Jefferson Clinton at almost midnight when he was leaving office. One of the biggest felons in our country. Wow. And we have justice and freedom and the Constitution of the United States. You know what? It's all a sham.
There's a story there, how he swindled the Vatican out of their American soybean operation. The Pope was in the soybean business through Chicago, fair and square, and Mark Rich wrecked that business. You could read all about it, and it was done through the corrupting and bribery of a judge here in Chicago. I don't want to go into all the details now. It would take a half an hour to do just that. Okay, but here is the point. This guy, Libby, has been Mark Rich's attorney. What did Libby do? He reportedly arranged for the last-minute pardoning of Scooter Libby, Scooter Libby as the attorney for Mark Rich, the international swindler, arranged reportedly over $1 million bribe to Bill and Hillary Clinton at the last few minutes of the Clinton administration as he was going out of office in January 01. And so who pardoned him? Bill Clinton pardoned this swindler whose attorney has been Scooter Libby, who's now under indictment by way of Patrick Fitzgerald. And right. Notice nobody in the press is talking about this, okay? Nobody in the press here is talking about the fact that Richard Cheney is facing indictment on terrible, serious charges of bribery in the courts and prosecutors in Paris, France.
Okay, so there we go. We got a minute left. I'm going to play more Sherman tomorrow. But if you think this is funny, don't you hear this guy had a lot of energy. This guy had a lot of, what do you call it? Just that get up and go to get after it. And if you think these shows were good, you should have listened to some of the conversations I had with him privately. I mean, he always wanted to work late nights, so I'd be talking to him from 12 to 2 at night. And all of those little things he said, well, we got a half hour to do, he told me about. And it was just an incredible guy. And one of the things we were discussing, which he doesn't get into in this show, was the Vatican. And I'm telling you, he was pretty savvy about what they were really all about from a business point of view. And when he knew the fix was in and they were working together. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.